I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Griffin, would you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Record and Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darien, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Acosta,
Here.
Mrs. Negum, Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mrs. Norian, Mrs. Shapiro,
Here.
Mrs. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Darien, Mrs. Nichols.
Here. At this time, we'll open to the public for agenda items only. If you're joining us on Zoom, you may raise your digital hand. When we call on you, please state your name and address and unblock your camera. We're open for agenda items only. If you have any comments on our agenda items, now is the time. No. It's not. Okay, not seeing any, we'll move forward. We're going to do a little bit out of order. We're going to skip to the business administrator's report so our auditor can get to his next appointment. So, Mr. Marmora, would you like to take over?
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Bliss from our accounting firm, Lurch, Vinson, Higgins, to give the 2020-2021 audit presentation.
Thank you, John. Good evening. Board members. Pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Button, there you go. Each board member should have received 2 books, a clear-covered, thicker book, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2021, and then a gray-covered, smaller report, which is the auditor's management report. Our charge as the auditor ultimately is to give an opinion on your financial statements, to give an opinion on your compliance with federal and state programs, to report on your compliance with government auditing standards, and on internal controls over financial reporting. Our opinion on your financial statements is unmodified. Unmodified means a clean opinion. Means that the financial statements are fairly stated, they're prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and there's no scope limitations in performing the audit. A clean opinion on your financial statements in an audit is an absolute must. If you do not have an unmodified or clean opinion, it means there is a defect or there is a scope limitation in performing the audit. And again, our opinion is unmodified and is clean. Our opinion on your compliance with major federal and state programs is also unmodified, meaning you complied with all the state aid and grant compliance requirements under those programs. Again, a clean opinion on Federal and state grant programs is a must. If there's a modification, it means you did not comply. And if you did not comply, it means there's potentially monies that are due back to the federal or state government. So again, unmodified on your federal and state programs. Our report on government auditing standards with respect to noncompliance, we had no issues of noncompliance reported in the audit, and we had no instances of internal control weaknesses with respect to financial reporting. Again, all three reports, the best that you can get. Again, unmodified opinions are a must. There's a lot of financial statements and a lot of footnotes and a lot of information in the audit report, but I'm going to focus the board members onto one page or one exhibit, which is the C1 exhibit, which is the budgetary comparison schedule for the general fund. Starts on page 68, goes through page 73. This exhibit is a line-by-line accounting of your general fund. It's a budgetary schedule, meaning it shows what your original budget was, how you modified that budget, and what your actual revenues and expenses were for the year. It's a line-by-line accounting of revenues and expenses of the general fund, which basically accounts for well over 96, 97% of the expenses of the district. At the end of the C1 on page 73 is a summary of fund balance. As board members, you're going to start the process of the 22-23 budget preparation, and you're going to want to know how much funds do we have on hand to fund the future budget, and what can we use those fund balances for. Well, overall fund balances for the year ended June 30, 2021 increased approximately $1.3 million. You started the year at $2,805,520. You ended the year at $4,133,953. Of that $4,133,953, certain funds have been set aside or restricted for specific purposes. And I'm going to go through that with you on page 73. The first restricted fund balance is capital reserve. The district has set aside $1,221,280 in its capital reserve account. Those are funds that the board put aside by resolution to fund future capital projects that are in the long-range facility plan. Currently, those funds are available. They have not been earmarked for any specific project, but are available to fund future projects. You cannot use those funds on any operating type costs, teacher salaries, health benefits, tuition costs, transportation costs, strictly capital projects for school facility projects. In addition to the capital reserve, we had a maintenance reserve of $643,157. Those funds are set aside for required maintenance expenditures. Can't be used for capital, can't be used for operating. Maintenance and capital are different in where capital items add useful life to the assets. They extend their life, they increase their value. Required maintenance keeps your school facilities in their current working condition. Doesn't improve them, it keeps them in their current condition. You have $643,157 in the maintenance reserve. It's the maximum you can maintain in that reserve, and again, only for required maintenance of school facilities. District also has set aside emergency reserve funds. Those funds are set aside and are actually very difficult to use in accordance with the statute. Currently, in the undesignated emergency reserve, you have $117,755. Those funds are set aside for any future emergency. They can be used at the time of adoption to fund security projects. They can be used during a year by resolution to fund unbudgeted health benefit costs that exceed 4%. To use it for anything else requires county superintendent approval, and it's a very difficult approval to get because they look at all the monies you have throughout the budget and fund balances in other areas. You also had emergency reserve designated for subsequent year expenditures of $100,000. These are monies the district is utilizing in its 21-22 budget to fund a security project. They're not available right now for any other future use. They're being used now for that project. If we only spend $90,000 of that $100,000, the leftover $10,000 will go back into the 117 emergency reserve that you have not used. Something new this year is an implementation of a new accounting standard, GASB 84, fiduciary activities, and basically changed how certain funds that were previously accounted for as trust funds are accounted for this year. In the case of Oradell, we have what is called an unemployment compensation reserve. Many years ago, the district elected to fund its unemployment claims on the reimbursement method. Basically means you're self-insured for unemployment. Every claim that comes through that is not contested, you pay dollar for dollar for. The board has $25,717 in its unemployment compensation reserve. It did not use any of that during the 2021 year. Excess surplus. In New Jersey, you're only allowed to maintain a certain amount of what is called unassigned fund balance, or surplus. After you make transfers into your capital reserve, maintenance reserve, emergency reserve, which are board approved, anything over the maximum you're allowed to maintain goes into an excess surplus reserve account. At the end of June 30th of 21, after the books were closed, after the transfers were made, the district ended the year with $400,000 in excess surplus. Those funds are restricted funds that must be used as a revenue source in the 22-23 budget. You cannot use them for any other purpose. So when you prepare the 22-23 budget, you'll have a revenue from fund balance of $400,000 as a minimum in that budget from fund balance appropriations. Last year, we had excess surplus, which we're using in the 21-22 budget, being used right now. When we closed out June 30th, 20, we were $478,757 over the max. Those funds are funding expenses in the 21-22 budget. They are no longer available to fund future expenses. On July 1 of the new year, they lose their distinction. They're being used, they're funding expenses of this budget, and when you close out next year, the new calculation will be done of the results of operation of that year. Under assigned fund balance, we have year-end encumbrances of $384,233. As we spoke with the Finance Committee, this number is large, or a large increase for Oradell. Normally that number is somewhere around 50,000. It represents open purchase orders at the end of the year for commitments that the district made for certain purchase of goods and services where those goods or services were not rendered, meaning the vendor didn't provide the goods yet, we didn't receive them, or the contractor didn't perform his contract. Therefore, you don't owe anyone money, but you've committed these funds for those purchases, for those purposes. When those contracts get performed, when those goods get received, those purchase orders get liquidated, and they get expensed against the budget. The reason that there's a large increase in those funds is there was monies committed through contract awards for the parking lot repairs that were done in the summer, security camera purchases that were done in the summer, as well as laptops that were ordered that were not received until after June 30th. That leaves us with the unassigned fund balance, or surplus, what's available to the board going forward to fund future expenses, any type of expenses in the budget. Big change in this account on how this was calculated. Last year, it was based on a 2% of your budget. The state changed that regulation for 2021, and they changed it for 21-22, so it's only a 2-year change to increase the 2% to 4%. Okay, big change. But in addition, previously, the board was not allowed to use the money that was in that 2%. The law also allowed the district now, by board resolution, to transfer money out of that 4% and put it into the budget without any approval from the state or from the county superintendent. When we ended the year there, we had $463,054, and it represented your 4% plus some additional funds from state aid we received over and above what we budgeted. Again, the max you're allowed to have, 4%, and again, the board can transfer out of that during the year. Overall, financially, the district did very well, increased its capital reserve by over $500,000, ended the year with the full 4% in your unassigned, and also was able to have $400,000 of excess surplus that you can utilize toward your 22-23 budget. So financially, the district is certainly in very sound, stable financial condition, and as we've seen in other districts during this era of COVID, a lot of things that costs that normally take place, such as substitute teaching and transportation, those costs have not increased but actually decreased during the year. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. We'll go to the smaller report, our findings and recommendation. Again, we had no recommendations that rose to the level of a government auditing standard finding. I'm going to just turn to the last page. I think it's page 14 or 13. Page 12. Page 12, we had one recommendation. Just overall, the condition of the district financial records are really in excellent condition. They're really in very good condition. We had one recommendation related to capital assets. Although capital assets don't really play into what your fund balances are, obviously you're required to keep an accounting of them. Oradell keeps the accounting of their capital assets in its current computer system. A lot of districts don't do that. They spend money and hire an outside firm to keep the accounting of it. You guys keep it in your current accounting system. We had some issues with considering all the turnover from BAs to an interim, then finally to John taking the position. There were certain capital assets that have not been updated in the accounting system, so we just need to update our internal records, get them in agreement with the audit, and and just make sure we update them on an annual basis. So our recommendation is recommended that district's capital asset accounting records be updated on an annual basis. Again, overall, I think this is a great report. I think the business office is doing a great job. And financially, the district is certainly in a very good, strong financial position.
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Oh, Mr. Walsh.
How come the report is given to us in February?
That's a great question. In the past, we used to be here in November, maybe late December, latest December, sometimes even in October. There's certain information in the report that comes from the Division of Pension and Benefits. It's post-retirement medical benefit information for the teacher's pension and annuity fund. Even though the board does not pay for teachers' pensions, the state actually contributes for the pensions, for the teachers' FICA, Social Security tax, as well as their post-retirement medical benefits. That information for what's called OPEB, post-retirement medical benefits, is required to be included in our report. It doesn't affect the numbers we just went over, but we have to disclose that information, and there's certain statements that it shows on. That information we didn't get until January like 26th. So we finished the audit. It was probably one of the first audits we did. We finished in October. We provided a finance committee with the fund balance that we just went over, but we can't issue the report without that information. If we did issue that report without it, we would have that modified opinion saying, all right, here's your report, but there's something wrong with it. There's something missing. So unfortunately, the delay, caused us to issue the report last week.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Mr. Bliss.
Thank you. Have a
Good
good night,
evening.
everyone. Thanks.
Mr. Marmar, you want to continue your report?
I have nothing else to report. Just like to thank Mr. Bliss and his team, Chris and John, that came in and did the audit, because it's not a once-a-year thing. I'm constantly talking to them, consulting with them, and getting advice from them. So I appreciate that, as well as the board support from every one of you. So thank you for that. I'd like to thank Superintendent Bozius and past interim superintendent Longo for their support. And of course, I have to thank my team in the business office, Mrs. Stephanie Guzman and Mrs. Amanda Ernst, as well as past staff member, Mrs. Melissa Ramirez. They just do a great job, and I'm very proud of them and what they've done. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, and the board would also like to extend our thanks to you for a great audit. Very, very clean books this year. So it was your first, I think, full year with us, and so we appreciate it, and also thank your team for us.
Will do. My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, to my report, I think everybody should have finally gotten the list of committees in their packets. So we finally updated those. We have those. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bozios. This morning we had a task force meeting, and we asked Ms. Bozios to update the board on where we stand with our COVID issues.
Sure. First of all, do you realize you are sitting where something really special happened last night? For the first time since 2019, we had an in-person choral concert right here, and that was so exciting for us. Additionally, right on this stage after school today, our student government crowded that stage and counted 403 pairs of pajamas as part of our Wear a Pair, Share a Pair event. Also another event that was a little different last year. So it was so nice to have the return of those. And maybe that, in addition to our COVID task force meeting, put me on a bit of a reflective trail. I kept thinking to the day before we reopened in September 2020, and I was putting signs up outside when one of our Church Street neighbors approached me. Lives on the corner, has been there for a very long time, and she said, "Do you think it's going to work?" We had just spent weeks planning safety measures and envisioning hybrid and remote programs, and frankly, we never thought, will it work? We thought, how do we make this work? Every decision we've made over the past 2 years focused on putting students in a place to prevent educational disruption. For example, while some districts last year streamed to students who chose a virtual model, we provided a full remote program with an assigned teacher. We believed letting teachers focus on either the students who were in front of them or on the screen would create a better educational experience. This year, we also made decisions with a similar focus in mind. We decided to have students eat lunch inside with appropriate distancing. In September, we were critiqued for that decision, for not eating outside. But we stood by our belief that if we could minimize quarantine by ensuring students were 6 feet apart when unmasked, it would create a more consistent educational experience. As a result, we have only had 2 quarantine experiences this academic year. That's been one of the biggest questions about pivoting to mask optional. Our students are sitting less than 6 feet from each other in the classroom. Once the building is mask optional, under the current guidelines, this would mean all students around a COVID positive student would need to quarantine unless both individuals were masked. We anticipate this being revised next week when the new guidelines are released, but we need to see those guidelines. Sometimes our decisions lean toward the more cautious. For example, we waited to implement a reduced quarantine isolation period. Ultimately, that caution worked in our favor because we learned from other districts that the reduced period was resulting in symptomatic students returning to school. As a result, as we move to reduced isolation periods, we know the stumbling blocks. Conversely, we have been more comfortable at times with less restrictive measures, such as beginning the year with no domestic travel quarantine, while other districts around us chose to have one. As a result of our protocols over the past 2 years, we created consistency in instruction that resulted, and our board doesn't know this yet, in our students showing more math growth on the Linkit Navigator B assessment this year that we have ever seen before. We grew 20 percentage points from September to January, when our past averages were 12% and 13%. Also, as a result of our protocols, we've been able to move forward by bringing back OPS traditions. Last night, we had our first in-person concert. Rehearsals have begun for this year's OPS musical, Moana, and Hoops is back in 6th grade. Additionally, we are beginning to plan for something I never thought would happen this year, an overnight field trip, as we send our 6th graders to Sharp because we don't want them to miss the experience that over 30 classes before them have had. Because of our carefully considered protocols, we arrive at a point today where we have had 2 positive cases in the past 3 weeks. We have not 1 active case in the building right now, and not 1 student or staff member in quarantine. In this week's community flash, you'll learn that we are dropping our international travel quarantine at this time as well. We are optimistic that we are in a place where we can continue to move forward. As a result, we anticipate moving to a mask optional protocol beginning March 7th. The reason we have chosen not to announce this officially is because next Tuesday, February 22nd, the state will release its updated guidance. This should provide us with a clear picture of revisions to implement with regard to quarantine, outbreak, and other mitigation measures. For example, the current guidelines recommend a class quarantine when there are 3 positive cases in the same class. And we've had that happen this year. We had 5 cases in one class, and that class had to quarantine. If that continues, we may decide to have a conditional mask mandate for one specific class for 7 days because we don't want to send them home. We want them in school and learning in school. What has worked best for us is putting protocols in place that ensure students stay learning inside our school building. So our mask optional protocol will be a conditional one. If our regional transmission rates rise, we may move back to a mask mandate. Our approach will be fluid and focus on data because that is what has kept us moving forward. And as frustrating as it has been, we are not comfortable communicating all of this yet because we don't have the guidance and we're just going to have an incomplete picture. We respect that some districts have chosen to do so. However, this district prides itself on planning first and implementing second. As a result, once the guidance is released and we have had time to absorb, we will communicate a full revised COVID protocol plan. The plan will include our operational next steps, and very importantly, will also address how to help our students emotionally adjust to a mask optional classroom. I attended a workshop today on just that. And we started the workshop, they asked all these educators in our virtual Zoom, what's the word that you're feeling right now? And my word was optimistic. I am optimistic that OPS has the people and the tools to continue to move forward, and I want nothing more than that. But the truth is, the one thing we need right now is a little bit of time to do it right. Because the worst thing we can do is to have an incomplete picture and not have those students go to Sharp. The worst thing we can do is have an incomplete picture and not get to see those students on that stage performing Moana. So I am confident, I'm optimistic, and I'm incredibly proud of this district. I stalk data, as many of you know, and I watch all the numbers around us. And let me tell you, our numbers are some of the best around. We're ready to move forward, and I'm ready to help us do that. Just need a little time to do it right. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Bozius. Moving on to minutes, we have review of January 26th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Marmora. Tonight we have the approval of January 5th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of January 5th.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Moving to committee reports. Mr. Darian, Buildings and Grounds.
Yes, we have not had a building and grounds meeting since our last. We were waiting for Lan, our architect, to schedule a meeting which will occur this Friday. And in that meeting, we should get our first presentation as to what they have envisioned for this room, for the auditorium remodel. So we're going to be pushing as fast as we can. Our goal is to have this room remodeled this summer. So I know it's February, but you know, we're going as fast as we can. Fortunately for us, the long lead items, you know, is only the chairs. Everything else is pretty much, you know, it's not a hard asset that needs to be ordered. So, you know, I'm optimistic that, you know, we'll have this room ready by next September. With that said, I'd like to introduce agenda items B1 and I believe that's it. B1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Curriculum. Mrs. Norian is not here. Mrs. Walker, would you like to take that?
Certainly. I'd like to present C1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
Sorry,
Mrs.
just a
Shapiro?
comment. Looks like the Odyssey's going in person this time for the first time in a few years. That's wonderful. So nice to see moving forward. It's great for the kids. Thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Finance, Mrs. Shapiro.
So since the last meeting, we've had two meetings. The first one was a couple of weeks ago. And unfortunately, at the last second, I was not able to attend due to family emergency, but the budget for next year was discussed in a preliminary fashion, so we'll return to that next time when we get together. We also met this evening at 5:45, so we've been here for a while, where we also met with Jeff Bliss, got a preliminary review of the audit that we all saw this evening. Dorothy, you took the words out of my mouth. I also want to congratulate Mr. Marmora on such a great job with the audit, because we've seen, it was never anything serious, but we've seen a few little wonky things here and there, and this one was really well done. So that was really nice to see. You're doing a good job there. This evening, we discussed a review of some technology and some updates, some items we can consider and prioritize from this year's budget. And we also did a quick talk about the budget for summer explorations. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve items D1, through, I think it's D10. D12.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Negum?
Yes?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh.
I have a legislative meeting, but it happens to be on the 26th, which is, called them and told them I couldn't make it because I'm a judge for the Odyssey of the Mind that same day. So they said that they would get the minutes of that meeting back to me so I could give it to each one of you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Personnel, Mrs. Walker.
Yes, we've had no meeting since last time, and I would like to present F1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Negum?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols?
Yes. Public relations, and I guess we'll do task force together, Mr. Griffin.
Sure.
Oh,
There's-
no, I'm sorry. I skipped policy with our new chair, Mrs. Neegum, sorry.
Nothing to report today.
Okay. Mr. Griffin.
So no update on the public relations, we haven't met, but we did meet on the COVID task force. I don't have anything else to add than what Ms. Bozios presented. It was a really great meeting, and I think the word of confidence and optimism and moving forward are the ways that I think we're going about it, and going about it very thoughtful. So I appreciate the time that's been spent on the administrative side and on the committee side on that.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to open to the public. We have maybe a little over 55 people here. We're going to open the session for 1 hour. We're going to limit each person to 3 minutes for right now. If we hit the hour, we may have to limit it to 2. Anyone in person, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand. I'll call on you. You can come to the mic. You will state your name and your address. If you are on Zoom joining us, raise your hand. Once we call on you, you'll state your name, your address, and unblock your camera. So we will start the session now, and Mr. Darian will be timing. So I guess we have our first speaker.
Just make sure you press that button.
Oh, it's on. Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Nutlin, and I'm proud to call Oradell my home.
Mr. Nutlin, can you just give your address to us?
259 Morris Street. I've emailed Ms. Bozios, and I want to thank her for her prompt and her appropriate response on Friday pertaining to unmasking our children. I respect the job that you do, and I acknowledge the hurdles and the hoops that you go through to keep our school open. As an educator myself, school counselor, dad, neighbor, and I come here to serve my community. I'm here today not to complain or gripe. I'm here to motivate. I'm here to encourage and highlight the importance of unmasking our children on March 7th here at OPS. Masking has impacted 3 school years for our children. Our children are the ones who have had to make the most sacrifices, yet they remain voiceless. They have missed out on birthday parties, family gatherings, holiday celebrations, grandparents, normal classroom activities, and playing with their peers. Since the lockdowns and mask mandates, an unprecedented trend upwards in problems has ensued, according to several reports from the CDC and Johns Hopkins University. These problems include, but are not limited to, anxiety, facial tics, depression, acne, plaque buildup, school avoidance, attendance issues, and apathy. Those issues don't even touch the scores of problems that they've witnessed in their own homes. And guess what? Our children, they have witnessed these. They have lived through these. The educational impact has also been tremendous. The implementation of IEPs, 504s, have without doubt had compromises. Support services such as speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy have been challenging and difficult. The greatest sacrifice that has been that our children have not seen the beauty of their peers' faces and the role models in this building that serve them. Earlier in November, my son Matthew went to a birthday party. After the party, he goes, "Mom, Dad, my friend's mom is really, really nice." And we said, "Matthew, how do you know?" And he responded, "Her smile was so big." Most studies have concluded that 55 to 75% of our communication is nonverbal. Facial expressions are one of the more important aspects of human communication. The face is responsible for communicating not only thoughts or ideas, but more importantly, emotions.
3 minutes is up, sir.
I have 1 more minute and I'm done. We like to talk about social emotional learning. And if we are concerned about social emotional learning, then on March 7th, we must unmask our children. Let them see the face of their children smiling positively, affirming a job well done. Let the children see the hope and the encouragement through facial expressions of their peers. Let their teachers, the people who see our kids for 5+ hours a day, see the apprehension, the angst, the stress, the happiness, the joy that they communicate throughout their day. I encourage you to follow the science. I encourage you to look at the hypocrisy that has allowed celebrities, sports stars, and political leaders to forego masks as our beloved children sit and rebreathe their own breath for 5 hours a day. I encourage you to find the strength to decide promptly to allow all families to have the choice to unmask their child.
Thank you,
Most of
sir.
us here are
Sir.
for choice. I want
Sir.
to continue. If you want to continue to mask, please do. Please find the courage to unmask our children so they can start to see those warm smiles again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Vince Galcione, 102 Beverly Road. And similar to the previous speaker, I just want to urge the board here to ensure that on March 7th, the children have mask optional. We talked about, and Principal Bozios talked about the data. I think when you look at the data, children are among the lowest at risk for COVID. When you look at the number of the mortality rate among children over the last 2 years, it is at or lower than flu. So that really should resonate with why are we masking children? You walk around town here and you see adults, you see elderly people not wearing masks, yet our children have to spend hours a day masked up. It's not right, and honestly, it's hard to say what would have happened had the district been more open to mask optional. I know that you kind of said that other districts had gone, had been more flexible in that. But my experience has been, just judging from when my son was home from school last year, they were not learning, and they were not at the level they should have been. And I thank you for the fact that this year, for the most part, they have been in, and I've seen the benefits of it, but there has been a lot of cost to the last year and a half, the protocols that we've been in COVID. So I'm really looking forward to the mask optional, and for those who wish to continue to mask, that's their choice. But our children really do need to go back to normal. Thank you.
Mrs. Galcione, I just want to make one clarification.
Yes.
When you mentioned in Ms. Bozius' report that she said other districts were more lenient with mask optional, none have gone mask optionally yet because it's the governor's mandate. When she said certain items were a little bit more lenient, that was with the 10-day quarantine versus 5, and we were a little more lenient with the travel. I just want to clarify that she did
Okay.
not say other districts were doing things that they weren't. But thank you
Right.
for your...
But there were other districts, though, in the state that even last year were doing in-person learning. There were other districts around the state that did in-person learning.
We were in person.
I'm sorry?
We were in person.
Last year?
You mean like full day in
Full day,
person?
yes.
Very few districts in South Jersey because of the size of the district. The size of our district definitely worked to make
And
that
also
difficult.
Morris County as well.
Okay.
I will just say, as far as Bergen County goes, maybe you want to make a comment on this, but we had our K through 2 here every day, where many districts did not. So,
Well, and I appreciate that. I'm not minimizing that.
Yeah,
I
no.
appreciate that. And some districts, but a lot of private schools were also in-person learning. And a lot of parents, at least the feedback that I received, a lot of parents really appreciated that.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Lisa Ballerini, 319 Grove Street. You may have heard my name. I'm the one that started the petition for the mask optional. Ms. Bozios, I want to take my hat off to you. You have done a tremendous job. I know we have one of the largest schools. I just want to ask, Governor Murphy put the mandate in, right? When we had our reopening plan before that mandate was put in, were we opening with our own mask mandate? Because he only put the mask mandate in right before school opened, so our opening plan had to be finalized prior, right?
It actually, a reopening plan stated that we would follow what the governor's order was.
Okay,
we
so
were- Yes.
So, to that point, if the governor never put in the mask mandate, would we have just been doing what we're doing now? Or that's what I'm trying to understand, like what we're waiting for? Because if we were opening as per the governor and there was no mask mandate, what would be different that our kids are doing that they're doing now? You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
We understand what you're saying. You can keep going.
Okay.
It's not a give and take. Just give us your thoughts. We understand what you're saying.
That's my question. What would we, so if we were following the governor and Governor Murphy never put in the mask mandate, what would be different September 2020 besides these children wearing a mask than these children not wearing a mask?
I can't answer that. I don't know, because it didn't happen, so we just followed the governor's
Right.
mandate at the time.
So what I'm saying is, and you were opening fine like that. So now the governor says the mask can come off. So what are we waiting for that is going to change what we're doing already? And I understand you explained the quarantine, but I did a petition and there's over 100 signatures in one day. So that means there may be people that'll leave their kids wearing masks. So worrying about the close contact and making that the focus, or worrying about when some of the kids are already vaccinated, and as per CDC, if you're vaccinated, I know I was shocked to find out my daughter's a freshman in Riverdale, just because she took the shot, even if she's exposed, she could go right back to school. My youngest has the antibodies. I checked his blood. He can't go back to school because he didn't get the shot. Both of them are exposed. Both of them could get COVID again. or get COVID at all. Mia never had it, but Paul did. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm just confused I respect the way you followed everything. I love that my kid was in school even half a day. I know there are other districts that weren't. This is not easy. As an employer, I know that I don't even want to use that word, the C word. I don't even want to use it. It's horrible. But I just want to know, it doesn't make sense to me logically, if we were opening and our plan was whatever the governor said, and he never put the mask mandate in, why can't we just take off the mask March 7th?
I think what Ms. Bozio's point was, she didn't say we're not taking off the
No, I
mask.
know, she,
What
actually,
she
tonight,
said was,
she gave me the best news I
yeah,
ever heard.
what she said was, we want one communication going out with all of our COVID protocol changes on one. I don't think she said we're not masking, so nothing has gone out.
Okay.
So everything will go out at once.
Okay, so that's all I'm just trying to understand is if our opening plan didn't have a mask mandate and it was whatever the governor said, and he had never put it in, then our kids would have been in school right now without masks. So I just think it makes the most sense to now on March 7th, let it be mask optional. And then we'll see, because you know what, there are a lot of parents that want their kids to wear masks every day.
That's the problem. Right now, the way the quarantine guidelines are written, both children have to have a mask on. So if child A doesn't have a mask on and gets COVID, and child B is sitting here because his parent insists he wear a mask, he still has to quarantine. I believe that's going to be revised, but it isn't. And that's when you ask about what the governor put out, that was really it. When the New Jersey Department of Health and the CDC put the 3 feet thing, that was different than last year.
Right.
That's why we had, not to have everyone in last
because
year.
it was 6
We
feet,
needed
right.
6 feet.
I-
So as soon as we got the 3 feet, and that's what we were so happy about, we were able to move forward. And that's just the one piece of information, because I want to be able to send it all out to the community.
No, and I
at once.
respect that, but, so let me ask you, if that kid, all right, so the 2 kids, one's not wearing a mask, the other one's wearing a mask. If the kid wearing a mask is vaccinated, does he still have to quarantine?
Under the current guidelines, no. But
Okay.
again, I don't know what will
No,
come
okay,
out
because I
next week.
can't imagine they would make the guidelines worse, right? I
Neither.
mean, if the guideline's that good now, that he doesn't, I would think, I mean, obviously, we know politics doesn't always go common sense, but, I just wanted you to know that I am not disparaging your job at all, or the district. This is a great school, and our kids are very lucky. But my little son, the other day, I said to him, his friend's fish and chameleon died, and I said, Paulie, how is Nicky today? He lost his fish, and he said, oh, Ma, he was so upset. I said, did you give him a hug? He goes, are you crazy? The mask lady is going to call the FBI on me.
She's over.
That's what he
I
said.
stopped it at 3.
So, it makes you sad, right? Like, for the kids. So that's all I have to say. I'm glad you answered or couldn't answer that question, but here's to March 7th and freeing the smiles. That's all I have to say. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Don Lapone, 861 O'Connell Place in Oradell. I think that the gentleman who came up here so well prepared did a fantastic job. I think we all know the pluses and minuses of masking. It was very encouraging to hear Ms. Bozio talk about the plan and the intention and the optimism, I think, to do away with masks or do a mask option, I guess is how we speak of it. And I think that all of us that are here want to see the masks come off our kids. By the way, I was here last night, sitting in the second row, watching my incredibly beautiful, smart, probably best little granddaughter in the world, sing with these other children. It was fantastic, and just, you could get tears in your eyes. It would be great now if we had the tears in their eyes and have it come down all the way down their cheeks, instead of being sucked up by these horrible masks. So I encourage you, whoever gets to make the decision, please, March 7th, let's be optional. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
I'm Cynthia from 690 Park Avenue. I'm new to Oradell, so OPS is, my
Cynthia,
kids-
what's your last name?
Corey,
And I'm sorry, what was your address again?
690 Park Avenue.
Thank you, sorry, I didn't hear you.
So we're new to OPS and actually all of Jersey. And I have a child in fourth grade as well as in second grade. And I'm on behalf of talking for my fourth grade son, who has found it very, very difficult to make friends in school, being masked up. So last year we came in, there was only one other boy in his class. So it was very difficult to make any friends that were boys, and the rest were girls. Towards when we started bringing cohorts in, he became friends with one kid. Now this year, we have a lot of boys in class, but it's been a struggle with the mask. And he comes home, and it bothers me because he says he has no friends. And I'm like, what do you mean you have no friends? You don't talk to kids in class? He says, maybe one. They call me weird. And I'm here on behalf of him that the mask has affected the children significantly in making friends, in communicating, and moving forward. And I am here on behalf of him. My daughter doesn't have a problem. She's masked up. They all are masked up, but she's different than him. He's quiet. He's like me. And I can't believe I'm up here talking right now, but I'm doing it for him. And so please consider it. March 7th for him, for me, and all the children that are being affected by this, because it's not only him, because I'm sure there's plenty of other children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Just a reminder for those joining us on Zoom, just raise your digital hand if you would like to make a comment. Any other comments? I'm going to close the open comment section. We want to thank you all for coming. We love when people come to our meetings. We wish you would come every week. But we always know people only come when they're not happy with things, but we are very much appreciate you coming. We have heard you. We all want the same things for our children. Obviously, of course, we all want to get back to normal. We want to be unmasked. We want our kids in school. We want them playing sports. So we all want the same thing. We hired Ms. Bozios because she's been here for 10 years. She knows our district. She knows our community. We trust her. I will just say this, she has done a phenomenal job with running our districts with COVID. She, along with our admin team and our teachers, have been rock stars. Other districts, they have shut down. They have not come. Our teachers showed up here last year, this year, every day. They are coming for your children. So I wanted to say thank you to them. I want to say thank you to our admin team who have been working hours around the clock. Ms. Bozios, she keeps us informed. She wants the same things for your children. We are just not going to throw it out there without having all the information and one communication for everything. So I am sure it's going to be coming timely. It will not be coming March 6th, the night before. We're going to see what the updates come. Knowing our state, they'll probably put it off, but hopefully they announce February 22nd. Ms. Bozios and her team will get together, and we all want the same thing. We want our kids happy, and we want them in school. So we do thank you all for coming, and please come to other meetings. And at this point, I'm just going to open up to the board for any old or new business. Mrs. Neegum?
Yeah, just a question on D8. Can someone tell me what the Special Education Medicaid Initiative is?
Yes, we just discussed that before. Go ahead, Mr. Momora.
So this semi in D8 refers to special education costs for a specific population of students. The minimum amount of students that you would have to qualify this would be 40. In our district, we have 13 students that qualify for this. And in that case, we can apply for a waiver from the state, from the county, excuse me. And that's what the resolution is for.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Walker?
Just a quick repeat of what many of you have said. Thank you, Mr. Momora, for your very, very conscientious overseeing of the budget. As Nancy said, we've seen over the years nothing major, but little things that have popped up that have been recommended. And one little thing this year, which is not that catastrophic. So I really applaud you, your whole team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to, under old business, I guess, say thank you to Mr. Griffin for being the chair of the COVID task force. We've met 13 times. I don't know if you guys realize it, but we've met 13 times since November of 2020. We've met 4 times just this year since Omicron. And you know, we spend a lot of time in these meetings deliberating and at times yelling and screaming at each other. And you know, we have our attorney present usually, you know, just to make sure that we make the right decisions. And we also hear from him from other districts, you know, in terms of what they're doing, what they're experiencing. You know, I wasn't planning on mentioning it, but actually he said that, you know, other districts that went to mask optional, oh no?
No one's gone to mask optional yet.
Okay, so actually
No quarantine?
we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
So anyway, I'd just like to thank you for your time and your effort. I think that the COVID task force has done a really good job. I'm glad that we put it together. I'm glad we collaborated very quickly for Ms. Bozios, and I think it made a real big impact. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I definitely want to make sure that the real effort is behind the scenes with the administration and the other members of the task force. I appreciate it. I think when we first talked about doing it, we knew that COVID was going to require us to pivot and be flexible and change rapidly. And I think the idea of having something like this was as much about having a place to back up and have these kind of detailed, you know, conversations and debates and move things forward and make sure that we're supporting the administration appropriately as changes are needed. So thank you for that.
Any other old or new business? We do need to go into a closed session quick for just a student safety issue. Does anyone want to make the motion?
I move that we go into closed session, I guess.
Second.
You guess? All right, 8:35, we will be going to closed session. We will not be taking any action when we come out.